Hey everyone, how are you doing? Thanks for joining Open Live from React Play. This is an excellent initiative that the community started very recently, and this is the first episode for that particular initiative, and we are really excited. We're very excited, like how this initiative goes. And in this first episode, we got some excellent topic with some outstanding developers from the developer community, and I am hoping that you all are going to like that. So before we get started, a few things that I want to cover. One is definitely along with me there is Pritesh. Hey Pritesh, you want to say a quick hi?
Hello everyone, welcome to React Pay Live. This is our first episode and hope you enjoy our tech talk for the night.
Awesome. So myself and Pritesh are going to host and going to take you through this particular stuff, this particular session, and I hope that you enjoy it. But before we get started and get our speakers on board, I want to talk a bit about React Play. Want to talk things like around React Play because it could be new to many of you, and I want each of you to kind of know about the platform so that you can check it out. Okay, so the first thing first, the React Play is an open source project. If you go to reactplay.io, you will be able to access whatever we do, everything over there. We are there on Twitter, we are there on Discord. We'll post the Discord link on the chat in a moment, so you can join us. We can join the community. We can all learn together. We can actually share together. Though we call React Play React based item, but we most of the often like we do things like full stack development. We kind of create content, write articles, do documentation. So all the facet of open source work that you can think of that we actually do as a community. So please join us. I hope that you enjoy once you join us. Okay. So today's thing is about open mic. So what exactly open mic and how this idea came in picture from community? I just want to take 30 seconds to talk about it. So most of us as developers, like as we grow, and I can only talk about the developers that I have seen in probably the geolocation that I live in, maybe in India or in the Asia Pacific, is like people are usually very shy to talk. Even though they have a lot of knowledge, they know technically things very well, but they like to attend events, no doubt about that. But when you kind of push them to go to stage and talk about things, they feel a bit shyness and they feel a bit nervousness and things like that, which is very obvious. It is probably there in most of the people, but we want to make developers comfortable through this initiative, through the open mic initiative. The research says that most of the time people feel nervous or people feel like they should not go on stage and talk because they feel that they will be judged, what people are going to think about them, and how are they going to kind of put remarks and things like that. So being judged is something that we want to remove entirely in this open mic thing. Nobody is going to be judged. Okay, so anybody can come on stage, anybody can talk about anything technical they know, because only thing that they're looking for is to sharing knowledge. So that's the intent, and with that intent, we are going to start the first episode of Open Mic today. And with that, I'm going to introduce you three superb speakers of tonight. So first is Supriya. Supriya is going to talk about an exciting topic about clean code. Then comes Shlok. Shlok is going to talk about the topic about something related to UX. Let's that be surprised for now. Then Divyansh comes and he's going to talk about Next.js. So without wasting any further time, I'm going to invite Supriya here. So Supriya is going to talk about path to clean code, a journey to collaborative development in large scale projects. I'm very excited, like what exactly the topic look like. So next 15 to 20 minutes is with Supriya. Before that, Pritesh, if you want to quickly call out like how you want to take the questions to our audiences so that they also know like how they should be expecting the answers.
Yeah. So why any questions that you have during the entire talk, you can put them into the chat, and I'll be once the talk is done, what I'll do is I'll just pop this up like this, and then we'll be able to the speaker will answer your question. We'll be having a time frame of 3 to 5 minutes for the quick question and answer. Then later on you can connect with the speaker themselves via their socials if you have more questions with them. But I will suggest to put all your questions in the uh, chat section so that we can take it up once the talk is done. I've dropped
Awesome.
down
Thanks,
the
Preeti.
Discord link, so if you want to join React Play, join today.
Awesome. Thanks, Pritesh. So without any more delay, I'm bringing Supriya. Hey, Supriya.
Hey Tapas, hey
Welcome.
Pritesh.
Uh, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, quite excited.
Awesome. Awesome. So, okay, let's not waste any time. So please go ahead and get started with your topic, clean code.
Sure. Let me start sharing my screen. Awesome. So, hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about path to clean code. So, it's more about how you can maintain your growing code space and work in an effective manner with a collaborative environment. Uh, so, hi, my name is Supriya Manasandram. I work as a software engineer at an edtech firm called CK12 Foundation. So I mainly work around the front end technologies as a React.js developer. I'm also passionate about keeping myself engaged up to date with the latest technologies. So I do share my learnings on Twitter in public. This also acts like my public journal. I'm also active as an open source enthusiast. I'm happy to say that I've been part of React Play since its initial days. So I'd like to take this moment to thank Tapas and React Play to provide me this opportunity to get started as a public speaker. Along that, I've also recently understood the importance of technical writing. So I do share blogs around my learnings with the code experiences on Hashnode. So you can find me across all these platforms at the rate Supmin. All right, so that's enough about me. Let's get started with the topic. Today, I'll be talking about the best practices while working with React.js. And how did I come up with putting across these? Were while working in my org when we were growing with features on our code base. We took a pause at that moment and decided to restructure out the format in this manner, and we did see a lot of positive feedback out of it. And that's how I'm here to share my learnings with you all. So this talk will be divided into three main parts. One is how you can organize your folder structure. Secondly, how you can deal with your global state management, and an introduction towards TypeScript with React.js. Okay, so getting into the first bit, which is organizing your folder structure. I would be referencing to few of my projects here. I will share the resources at the end. So when you're working with the React.js project, ideally you would have a similar structure available. So you would have your package JSON where you add all your dependencies, various type of scripts you want to run them, and maintain your versions. So along with it, having a README file is very, very crucial. It becomes very important to explain what this project is about and the steps to start off with the local development so that your peers whom you're collaborating with would find it easy at a one-stop solution. This can also be a starting point for your documentation journey. Okay, so you will have your public folder where you can add your static assets and images, but you could also maintain them separately as an image folder within your SRC directory or the source directory. Everything within the source directory is what your main components of the app will be of. So the entry point is index.js, where you can maintain your global details such as routing and the providers, which I'll come to the in the next bit. And then this is your starting point of the application, which is the app.js. Within your app.js, this becomes your first component to be rendered when your project is live. So what I've tried to do is maintain various types of routes here. Some of them are public and some of them are private. So this particular application is of a video library where it's very similar to how YouTube works. So ideally, all your playlist history and all becomes your private routes where you're logged in and only then you can use them. So moving further, when you're developing, you might have certain helper functions, which are pure JavaScript functions. So it's good to maintain a utils folder here to store your helper functions. So let's say I have a filter get filter video function. So this takes a whole lot of a list, and based on certain filters, it does some manipulation and returns me the manipulated array. So it's good to maintain separate files for each of your implementation or each of your subcomponent related details. Next, we move to the services folder. So, if you're using it as a full stack application, I'm sure you would have certain APIs that you would reach out to in order to fetch data, and then you would need to manipulate this data based on some ways so that you display it in a better format on your UI. So this is where your services would come in. And again, based on the features, I have divided them into various files. And within each of these files, you can have UI related details such as the loader would start loading, and then I fetch from the API, do some manipulations, and update my state. Index.js is a very important file in each of these folders where you can add the path to all the remaining files of your folder. What this would do is it would be helpful while referencing to any of these data. So let's say I want to reference to get user playlist in one of my component. Instead of adding the whole path until slash playlist.js, I could just reference to the folder, which is services, which is quite evident. And then I can automatically pull this out because it is pointing through the index.js file.
Hey Supriya, just one quick
So
thing.
now we'll talk
Can you
about
increase? Can you
the
increase the
component
font?
folder. Yeah.
Can you please increase the
Oh,
font?
sure,
I
sure.
mean, zoom in. So yeah,
This is better.
maybe a little more.
But
This is better. Yeah, thanks.
so when we talk about the components folder, this is where I would prefer having subfolders within each of the components. So implementation related details. So let's say I have a playlist files, all the components related to my playlist feature. So the playlist.jsx becomes my component, contains all the code related to how the playlist should look and function. And further, I can look upon the components, which is maybe the header, which I can reuse in other components, or a specific card for each of these videos. At this moment, you could plan your stylings as well in the same manner. So I can have a playlist.css file which contains all the stylings with respect to my playlist.jsx. And here is where you can take a decision based upon how much customized styling you add, whether for each of your subcomponents also do you need an individual css file, or you could reference to the same file. So let's say in this example I have created only a single css file which has stylings for all my playlist related components. However, with the recent development of various third party libraries, so there's Tailwind, which is quite famous. So, what you could do is maintain a separate folder components within using Tailwind. So, I have like a primary button and a secondary button created in another project of mine where I'm using Tailwind, and this becomes my reusable component. Okay, so yeah, so now that we've learned how we could create components, right? So the next time we're moving towards creating a new feature, in order to maintain the common folder structure, you can make use of this particular VS Code extension, which is quite handy for me nowadays, where you can define your own folder structure. How do you want to create the component, and what all files do you want under it? For example, if I want to create a new component for some new feature, all I do is right click and call this template, either a JavaScript or a TypeScript file, name my component based upon the casing how I need it, and it will automatically create this test file, the component file, the CSS file, as well as an index.js to point it out to. All right. So now that we've understood how to create the folders, when we talk about stateful components in React, the first thing which comes into our mind is using useState, right? So if we are starting to create a new component where we want to maintain states. Let's say I take this registering for my applications. This becomes my sign up modal. What I would do is create one individual state with use state and maintain all the details within it, whichever is related to my credentials. So I have all the name, email, password, and confirm password acts as the form details. So this can all be crunched into a single state rather than maintaining multiple states for each of these values. Then we go about using our set state, which is the setter, and set it according to whatever manipulations we have been doing. Further, when we move ahead, if whenever the implementation increases, let's say we might need to add more states based upon new requirements, that is when you start making decisions upon how you can move further. So I have this rule in mind saying if you use more than three use states, that is the right time to call and decide to use a use reducer instead of a use state. So it becomes much more cleaner approach to understand how you can maintain your states. And it is around this point where you would also start working upon multiple subcomponents, their child components, and then prop drilling comes into picture. So this becomes the initial point where you decide that you need a global state management for your application. So the simplest approach here would be to first context and use reducer. So what you do is you can create a context folder which should maintain all your separate contexts. Again, I'm splitting it based upon the functionalities. So I have a data context which maintains all the data in it, and an auth provider or the auth context which maintains authenticated relation details. So I'm using nhost through nhost. So rather than using them across my applications, I create an abstraction here. So I use the nhost details in my auth provider and expose only my custom created use sign in functions across my other components. In this similar fashion, in my data context, I create a variable state is maintained for all my data. And within the reducer is where I also store my initial data state. A good reason for this is, let's say I started out working on this reducer and I created the initial phase, and next my peer has to take it up for adding a new feature. So at this point, it'll become helpful for them to understand what kind of state variables are already existing, and then how could they reuse them or add the new ones. Around the same point is where you could also create an actions file which acts as a maintaining all the different types of values across which you use the reducer's actions, basically the actions on which a dispatch is called. So again, we have separated out based upon the two providers, and this is one thing which I have recently started using. So let's say I want to use this clearing the error message in multiple components rather than redundantly calling the dispatch same action and without the same payload. I've created a wrapper function, and this is also added in my actions because it is further referencing to the reducer. Okay, this is one point where I would also want to discuss creating your own custom hook as well. So once you've created your use context, you could expose your data context across your components, or you could again wrap around and create a custom hook here so that this data context is limited only to your provider file and not exposed across. So further down the line in any of your let's say files, you would only reference to this use data context hook. So let's say in this monthly report of mine, so I could access the data state from Okay, that was quite a bit of understanding. So at this moment, I would like to take a pause and help you understand how I do my learnings, like how I try to learn the next topic. Now that I've understood how I could move from use state to a combination of use reducer and use context to create a global state of my application, This becomes the right time to also understand what are the other third party libraries existing in the market with respect to creating global states and maintaining them. Redux being one of the most famous libraries, and of course, with Redux Toolkit in the industry, it's become all the more easier for the beginners to get started with it. Apart from that, we also have Flux, Mobix, Zastan, and many more. So you can start understanding initial bits of what they are and how they are different from each other, what are their USPs, and when is it good to use which of these. So, for example, it's suggested that if you're working with Next.js applications, Zastan becomes a very good option because they are optimized, created optimal to Next.js applications. Okay, so now we come to the last leg. So, what is TypeScript and why do we need TypeScript with React? In simple terms, TypeScript is nothing but adding a type syntax on top of JavaScript. So all you do is restrict your variables by adding static typing and say this is what, for example, let's say I have a variable called name and I define it with the data type of string. So across my application, wherever I use this variable name, I have to make sure that I use a string format itself and I can't use any other data types such as numbers or booleans, etc. So that is how we would be less prone to errors, and we can help collaborative collaboration in a better manner. So, but having said that, it doesn't mean that we'll have to like push TypeScript everywhere. So I have a React.js app ready. It's not that I have to convert the whole application into TypeScript in one day. So I can start gradually adopting to TypeScript. And how I could do that? We do have a TypeScript configuration file. Start integrate our application in TypeScript. There's a configuration file in this manner where you can go about on each of these properties and make sure how strict do you want this TypeScript to uh, act in your particular project. So let's say I want to include it for only certain files. Within this include array, I would add only those files which the TypeScript should accept and provide me the compilation details about. So, since I said it's on top of JavaScript, so you can use it on front end as well as back end. Wherever you use JavaScript, you can also additionally add TypeScript on top of it. And TypeScript is it runs only during the compilation time. It does not run in your production code. So it browser doesn't understand TypeScript. So everything is compiled into JavaScript while moving into production. So let me help you with understanding with a simple example. So when I say static typing, we create interfaces. So there's an interface called props, and I'm creating an object here where I'm saying this object can have only two properties. One is the name, and the other one is the year. And this is name is a string variable, and the year is a number. So when I'm using this in one of my React components, so I make sure this is the way you define and make sure that the props, whatever I'm receiving in this component, should be of the structure, whatever I've defined in my interface. So further, when we are referencing to any of the properties within this movie object, what would happen is the TypeScript has the ability to provide you code completion IntelliSense. So it'll tell you it just has only two variables and you can use either of them based upon your needs. Another example in the same line, let's say I'm using a name as a string and here I'm trying to edit and add a number value instead of a string. What would TypeScript do is help you understand what is the issue here. It throws an error and clearly explains as to why you can't assign this to a number because it's being defined as a string. So this becomes very clear to collaborative users. Let's say I created something yesterday and tomorrow one of my peers is working on it. They're not aware of the structure. So this gives a clear cut definition of how your project is being built upon. Okay, so there's also something called types instead of interfaces. Uh, the TypeScript documentation has done a really good job in explaining these things. So I wouldn't go much into detail, but I'll just show you one hint of how it works. Okay, so this is loading. That's all right. So you can go into this TypeScript handbook and understand that you can either define it as types or as interfaces, and they can interchangeably can be used with each other. So this particular guide helps you understand when is it recommended to use. So it says you can recommend it to use interfaces over types, so that it gives you a clear cut understanding of what your error is. So yeah, that's how you deep dive into more learning and how you can go about further. Okay, so let's summarize what all we learned. So we discussed about the folder structures where we could keep our helper functions as utils, and then have our components folder where we maintain further subcomponents on all our implement feature related details. This is where you can split your files into the actual JSX files and also your style files. You need not limit to only that. You can also go further and add your test files and storybook stories as well. You can maintain your public static images in your public folder, or also keep a separate folder as images and store it on them. I also gave you a VS Code extension, which is very helpful for me. I've been constantly using it across all my projects. And then we moved around how we could get started with working with stateful components in React, and how we would think about moving from use state towards use reducer, and finally get to a global level of using use context plus reducer approach. Um, After this, we also got a slight introduction towards how TypeScript works, the main crux of type safety, and how this helps the collaborative effort of uh, teams to work upon a single project. So, yeah, that concludes my topic. And these are the files which I refer to. So, you can go ahead and uh, refer to all my projects, or reach out to me at the rate Supmin at any of the platforms, and I'll be happy to help you out. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Big clap to you, Supriya, for delivering the topic. It was really great. And did you say that it was your first occurrence of public speaking?
Yes.
Do we have to believe that? You did really, really well. Very
Thank
nice job.
you.
Very nice work. It was very clear. Pritesh, you want to take up for the question
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, it was really, really nice talk, Supriya. I would say you explained everything really nicely. I loved your PPT, the way you made it, and even the structure of your PPT is like your structure of React project.
Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. So there is one question right now in the chat, that is this:
Is there
is
any
there
use case where we cannot use the stand and we have to use Redux only because I find the stand more easy? Ah, interesting. So I've recently started working with Next.js applications, and that's how I figured out that something called as Zastan exists. So until then, I was the person who was struggling with Redux, and then slowly moved into Redux Toolkit, which made my life very easy. So yeah, I haven't like compared between the two, but if you're saying Zastand is easy, I would say go with it, create a few apps with it, and then slowly you would get to understand what are you missing out. If there's something which you're not being able to do with Zastand, that's when it becomes the right starting point to figure out what are the other available libraries and how Redux could be much more helpful at that point.
awesome? Thanks for answering the question. I hope Harshit, Supriya answered your question. One quick question from my end, Supriya,
Sure.
that like, can you break down into the pieces that when to use just you, like when it is visible to use just use state will, will do the work, when we can use the hooks, and when we can use the Redux toolkit or Redux whatever, the third party,
Okay.
like, yeah.
So how I think about it is when I get started with the development. So think there will be a lot of ideas in your mind, and you want to put it across as your code, right? So at that point, you can start off with use states. Use as many as you want, but make sure you're using them clearly against a implementation. So as I said in my showed in my code that for your registration page, I'm creating only a single state where I'm using for all name, email, passwords, and etc. Like the whole form, rather than maintaining separate states for each of these properties. So once you have created what you intended to have, so you have your output ready. So it's that point where you get the thrill out of you to refactor your code and understand and learn more. So this is the point where I think if you have too many states, the re-rendering would come into picture. There might be unnecessary re-rendering based upon one state and the other not related to that. So that's when you start moving into the reducer so that you get a clear cut actions and when you want to update which particular piece of the state. But then when you talk about moving further down where you whatever component you've already created, that becomes your parent and you have a lot more child components coming in. So that's the point where you think about prop drilling, and there then is where you come into your context into picture. But further moving ahead from this, this is where I learned recently is let's say in my context, there are four states, but I'm using only one of them in one of the specific component. Although I'm just importing that particular state, there could be cases based upon how you have developed it. There could be cases that the component is being re-rendered even though your state is not being updated. So this is the point where you look about if your project has grown quite huge, right? So at that point is where you take a decision of including a new library, because if that library can provide you a power of managing the whole state, it would come with the cost of the memory as well. So you need to make sure of the trade-off, performance, and a lot more details in order to make a decision as to moving from the context towards a library.
Yeah, I agree with your answer, Supriya. Thanks for answering that. But uh, I would say like even the hooks, when you use hooks, there
Right?
is a unnecessary re-rendering happening,
Yes,
right? But yeah, it depends on the size of the project. If that is fine for you,
right.
then you can go ahead, right? Awesome.
I agree.
Thanks for answering the question. I guess we'll move to next speaker. Yeah,
Right.
Tapas.
Yeah, yeah, we'll do that definitely. Supriya, one request would be is like you can actually go to the YouTube link where this thing is getting streamed. There will be questions still on the
Sure.
chat to you. Please
Yeah.
answer them as we are kind of moving forward with the other one. Thanks a lot, Supriya.
Perfect.
You've done an awesome job. Great, great.
Thank you.
All right. So we are moving towards the next one. And the next one that we are going to talk about is about Shlok. So we have Slok here, Slok Srivastava, and his topic is pretty interesting name. Is your website visible? You know, when I read about it first time, I felt like, okay, is he talking about a blank screen at all? But I want to kind of let him unfold it for all of us. All right. So without any further delay, let me invite Slok on the podium. Slok, you are here, and I'm going to kind of let you introduce yourself. Go ahead with your talk and start sharing your screen. Okay, all the best, man.
Thank you so much, Tapas. I'll share my screen. Okay, guys, are you able to see my screen? Okay. Okay. So, everyone, my name is Shlok, and I work as a senior software engineer in Accenture. I have around 5 years of experience in IT, and yeah, all of that in front end. So, the thing that we are going to talk about today is about accessibility, and that's why I've chosen this title for my presentation. Is your website visible? So, when I'm saying about visibility, so I'm not saying that. So, whenever we go, whenever we go through any website, we just scroll down, we just hit the URL and just scroll down, see what the website is about and what it is offering. And if it's a, let's say, e-commerce website, then we see what product it's offering. If it's an intro page, we see what the person is about. So everything that we can just navigate and see, and get to understand, like, okay, this is the thing that is being delivered by the website. But what about the people who are visually impaired and are not able to visualize, like see the website, or the same way that we do. So that is something that we are going to discuss today, and I hope everyone will find it a little bit informative. Yeah, let's get into the presentation. So the agenda for today, the discussion we will be having is about the introduction to accessibility, the what the importance is, like how much it should be there in our websites, what are the benefits, and who are the users that are getting benefited from this accessibility. And then finally we will do some implementation and how to test our websites when we have implemented the accessibility. So uh, I would say, this accessibility is somewhat very little touched inside in India. I would say, because it's not a mandatory thing. It's more used outside India. So the accessibility is all about designing websites, and in such a way that everyone on the web, everyone who is using your website, everyone who has an access to internet and can access your website, can go through your page easily, and their disabilities don't uh, stop them, or from getting to know your website, your work. And so it's basically no bias to everyone, to anyone. Everyone has an equal opportunity to visit, to get the details, or get the data, get the information from the internet. And why should we even be considering accessibility? Why should we be implementing it? It's because uh, obviously equal access to everyone. Everyone should have the capability to access our websites. And the second is, it is a law, not here in India, but yes, in Europe, Australia, or US, it's a strict law that a certain level of accessibility should must be there in your website. So the next thing is, who is benefited from this accessibility? And I would say everyone. It's not just me and you who are able to see the screen. It's also the people who are not able to see the screen, and everyone that is using the internet is benefited from this. How? I will show you in a few slides. Now, there can be a lot of disabilities that people face, but like physical, visual, speech, or cognitive. But we are only going to discuss about the visually impaired people, their day-to-day struggles, and how we can make our websites better using the accessibility. Okay, so when we are operating, or when we are going through any website, then we usually use our mouse, right, to click on the website, to see, to open a link, to open an image and anything. But the visually impaired people, they cannot use the mouse. So what they do is they use the keyboard for everything, like for navigating, for entering a form data, or anything like that. They use keyboard. So the two set of keys that are mostly used for all of the tasks is the tab key and the arrow key. Obviously we have other keys as well, like the enter key and the space key it's used, but we are going to see the function of tab key and the arrow keys here, and why they are important. Now, if I tell you, when I say that you have to implement the accessibility, how would you know that you have implemented it, and you have implemented it correctly? Does it conform with the laws? Is it in accordance with the rules that have been set by the government, or the people who manage this? So for that, we have a very amazing document that is there, that is WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And this is a document which tells us, it has a description of how we can implement accessibility, what are the best practices, and a lot of things. So the link I will put it in the YouTube live, and you can go through it. um, I would quickly describe the conformance levels. So basically, there are three levels that are implemented in the accessibility. The first one is A. It's the lowest. That should be the minimum level of conformance that should be there in any website. If it's not there, your website may be considered as illegal. The AA mid, that is a general, for general criteria for the websites, and usually most of the websites that you see are under this level. It's like so accessibility is not something that you can fully implement, and you'll be like, okay, this is done, we have completely implemented the accessibility. It's an ever learning process. So any website can be made more accessible, and I'm not only saying from the function perspective, I'm saying from the UX perspective as well. So most of these websites are in the AA level, and a AAA, it's the highest level. It's really difficult to achieve that much, but yeah, some of the websites do have it. So it's about like how much your website is accessible, and it's a way of measuring the level of accessibility. Okay, now I will discuss about three most important um, topics that comes into play when we are talking about accessibility. The first one is semantics. So I think most of you people have heard about semantics. Semantics are the tags that they do what they say. So a button is a semantic tag. You say it's a button, so it will work as a button. Header, a footer. Header means at the head of the page, at the start of the page. A footer describes the end of the page, and a main tag, maybe it describes like the whole body of the page. So it's basically whatever the tag is about, it does the same job. So that's what the semantics is. And um, one more thing about semantics that we will be discussing in the code is using button for buttons and not divs or spans. So I will explain it in the code. The second is tab index. So tab index is basically a property to which we can use to implement focus on the elements that are not focusable, like div or span. They're not focusable by default, but a link or a button is focusable by default. So we'll see that in our code. And the third one is the area label. So area label is basically, so before we go to area label, we must understand label. Label is basically the text that narrator picks up when the narrator is going through your website. So area label is a property that it works as same as the label, but the difference is a little difference between both of them, which we will be able to see in the code. So without further ado, I will open up my code. And yeah, so okay, so let's go with the index example first, and we will see what it means to implement tab index. So you can see these two buttons on our page, and yes, these are two ugly looking buttons, but yep, they will do the job.
Sorry, Slok, to interrupt, but I can't. We can't see your screen. We are just on PPT, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now it's coming. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, um, these are two buttons which are we will be using for our demo. And yeah, we have not added much CSS because the reason is simple. We are trying to focus on how a person with a person who is visually impaired will go through your website. So these two are only a simple buttons. Let's say I click on this, and on the console you can see the button is clicked, and the same goes for the second button. It's working completely fine, correct? But what if I tell you that one of them is a button and the other one is a div? So this is something that we should always avoid. We should always use a button as a button and not div as a button. I'll show you why. Okay. Mm, can you guys see my screen again.
No, I can add that. Yeah, I think your screen is up again.
Yep, thank you. So so this is the code for the button. Two buttons we have seen. The first one is a regular button, which has a click handler and it's just displaying small text like one word in the console. And
I'm
this is,
sorry to interrupt you again, but can you increase the font size slow?
yep. Is it better now?
Little more. Can you increase it little more? Yeah,
Yep.
much better. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So these two are the this is the code for the two buttons that we have. And the first one is a button, a regular button which has a on click handler, and the second one is a div which is acting as a button. So basically when we are putting div as a button, we have to add a lot of other properties as well. For example, if I go back to our screen and I'm using tab to get to to focus here. Now the focus is on the second button. I hit on enter. You see that the it's working fine. But how does it work? We have to add a key down handler on this particular div, then only it works. If I just remove it and run it again, let's say I go again, and if I hit on enter, nothing is happening. So that's just extra work. We have to add a particular function, an extra function to for the div, and that's it's unnecessary to use div as a button. The other thing is about the tab index. So let me just display this button and I will show you the importance of tab index. If I remove the tab index from here and I go to this page and I press on tab. So usually tab key is used to navigate through the all the elements that have the focus property. So right now it's on button 1, and if I click on tab, you see it just ignores the button 2. And this is because we have removed the property from button 1 and but from button 2, and tab index was allowing the button 2 to basically be focusable. So that is one property of tab index. The second the last thing for this tab index example is I would like to tell about this one particular attribute, which is role equals to button. And that is something that is very important. So when we are seeing this, like right now when I have told you these are divs and buttons, these are not, all of them are not buttons, then but if you go through if you visit this for the first time, you will see that all of these are buttons. So I'm going to show you how narrator works, how the people who are using only narrator as a method to navigate the website will see this. I'm not sure if you will hear the narrator, but let's see.
Button 1, button, voiceover off.
So I would like you to focus on the left side of the where it shows what exactly it's speaking. So yeah, let me turn it on again. And yeah,
Leaving
so when it's
DevTools,
on button
entering
1,
tab, button 1, button. You are currently on a leave console, leaving DevTools,
button.
entering button 2, group. You are button 3, button 2, group. You are current, voiceover off.
So basically when it was, the focus was on button 2, it was saying group, which doesn't make any sense for the user. It will confuse the user that, okay, what group is this? Is this a checkbox group or a drop down? So that's why this role equals to button comes in. For the third one, we were seeing that the button, the narrator was speaking for the button 3 as button and not as a group. So that's where the property role equals to button comes in. Now sometimes it may be possible, it is it's always recommended to use the button as a button. But sometimes when you can't change, let's say for some reason there's a legacy code and you have to use the div as a button, then you can use all these properties to behave it like that. Okay, I think that's it for the tab example. I will open the forms. And okay, so basically I'm going to show you two forms. I will navigate you. I will tell you how to, when we fill the forms and how we interact with the form, and what happens when we are using a form that is like a simple form and then an accessible form. So the thing that you see here right now, it's a simple form. If you visit, see it for the first time, you will say, okay, it might be a simple form. Let's fill this up. For example, let's say fill any values, and then let's say we choose React as the preferred framework, and then let's say we choose Bangalore, and then we submit it. So a pop-up comes up that you want to submit it or not. So let me show you a related functionality. If we cancel, it goes back, and then again if we click on no, it goes back, which is the expected feature. Now if we click on submit and then we click on yes, it will display all the form values. And now this is fine, this is completely fine, and the form works. You would say yes, this is great. But right now you are using mouse to navigate through it, which is not something that is the other users, the visually impaired users are capable of. So let me show you their perspective. Now I'll be keeping this mouse here, and I will be only using keyboard. So now I click on tab. Okay, let's say we are able to fill the name field, and then let's say we are able to add email. Then we go to preferred framework. So usually the drop downs are always operated by the arrow keys, the up and down arrow keys, and you can use you know enter key to select the value. And then when it comes to the radio buttons, we use the space key to fill in the values, and then we can use the arrow keys to kind of go through and select the particular option. Now if we go on submit, if I click on submit and hit enter, the pop-up opens up. Now when the pop-up opens up, the expected functionality is that the user should be inside the pop-up, and he or she should get notified that the pop-up is open. So right now what's happening is, if I press on tab again, the focus is right now on submit button, and if I press on tab again, it goes to reset button, which will not make sense to the end user, because when he clicks on submit, he either needs to hear that okay, this form is submitted, or if there is a pop-up, then they should be able to hear it that the pop-up is open. But right now it's going to reset. Now if I press on tab again, it goes to the cancel button. So this cancel button is basically the cross sign, or the usually the button that is used to uh, close the pop-up. So that's the use of this button. And if I press tab again, it goes to the yes button, then the no button, and then I press on tab again. You see, it goes to the tab, Chrome tab, which does not make sense to the end user, because he will be lost when they're using your website. So, and even when the pop-up is open, the expected functionality is to basically stay in that pop-up, and if they do not want to go forward, then they can just close the pop-up, and they should be able to return back to the form where they were left. So this is where our accessible form comes in. I will show you an example of accessible form. This is the same form that I have just shared, only that it is more accessible than the previous form. So I'll keep my mouse here, and I will fill in the values. Then I will fill in the React. Let's say I select Bangalore. So now you can see this, that when you are clicking on submit, I hit enter, the focus automatically goes to the cancel button. And this is something that kind of say, you can say, as an expected behavior, because if let's say the user doesn't know that there is a pop-up when you hit on submit, so if the focus is on the cancel button, he or she can directly hit on the cancel button, and they will go back to the submit button, they will go back to the form, and everything will be fine. So if I hit on submit, the first focus should be there on the cancel button. Now this is just one pop-up. There can be other pop-ups as well in which there are other fields, but let's say for this example you have chosen this to focus this on the cancel button. Now if I hit on tab, it goes to the yes button. It have hit on no tab again, it goes to the no button. And then if I hit on tab again, it goes to the cancel button. So basically the user is keeps in the pop-up, they do not go out, so that now they can make a decision whether they want to move forward or not. So let's say they want to cancel the pop-up, they close the pop-up, they just hit on cancel, it will close the form. Or if say let's say they just want to change a, let's say, email value, so they click on submit, and when the pop-up is asking are you sure you want to submit, then they just click on no, and they will go back again to the submit button. So that way they will not be lost in the form. And the same thing, at the same time I'm going to show you what the user will hear when they are going to open the pop-up. So if I open the
Voiceover on
voiceover,
main. Heading level 1. Close this dialog button. Are you sure you want to submit? Click yes to confirm. No to go back to the forum. Dialog. You are currently on
so
a button. To
basically
click this button. Voiceover off.
so basically what it was showing that, okay, close this dialog button. So we were able to see only cancel, but the voiceover command, which I will open it again to show you guys.
To enables conversation open. Displaying IMD 2 crore none selected. Displaying IMD 2 crore 2 lakhs 30,000. Main. Reset the forum button. Main. Submit button. Submit button. Main. Reset the forum. Close this dialog button. Are you sure you want to submit? Click yes to confirm. No to go back to the forum. Dialog.
Okay.
You
So
are
guys,
currently
pay
on a
attention
button.
on
To
this
click
one.
this button. Voiceover off.
Basically, when the pop-up opened up, it was, we were only able to see cancel, but the user was able to hear close this dialog button. This was possible because of the area label. So if we go to the code, and I will show you the pop-up. So this is the button that is there, the area label button, which shows that you can close this dialog, and like it speaks this text. And same, if we go back here, it was so let me open it voiceover one last time.
To enables displaying IMG 2 crore. Displaying IMG 2 crore 2 lakhs 30,300.
Okay, I think something hanging here, but let me open it again.
Voice of Bangalore submit button. Main. Close this dialog button. Are you sure you want to submit? Click yes to confirm.
So
No to go back to the forum. Dialog.
So
Voiceover
basically,
off.
it was showing click yes to confirm, click no to go back to the form, which is basically we cannot add that much text to our pop-up because it will not look good. So the voiceover just tells us that we can use the yes button to confirm, or the no button to go back to the form, which is also possible because of the area label. So this is the area label. This is the text that is going to be spoken up when we talk when we are opening the pop-up. And we can use the area label as this we can use this property to add any text that we want. So in the UX, in the UI, whatever text you want to put, you can put, and then you can use the area label tag to go through put anything that the voiceover will speak up, and that will be a better experience for the person who is going to use your website. Okay, now I'll go move on to the next slide, which will be our last slide, which is the testing. So there are many tools available that are that you can use for Axe, like Axe or Lighthouse or Wave. That these tools are basically, you can integrate it in your Chrome, and they will give you a fair idea of what exactly the score is, how you can basically check how accessibility is implemented in your particular website. So for example, this is an Axe dev tool, and if there's it's just a simple thing that you scan all the page, and it will show you what the issues are. So for example, I just for this one, so let's say I remove a label. So let's say I just remove this name here, that is the first field, and then I go back here, and If I open up, so start a new scan, it will show us the error of what exactly. So form elements must have labels. So that this is how you can debug, and make your websites more accessible. Now, the screen reader that I just showed you, what was voiceover, that is usually used in Mac, and there are other screen readers as well, which is the narrator, NVDA, and JAWS. And you can try it out, whichever you feel more comfortable to use. You can use. There's no specific rule that you have to use one particular screen reader. Okay, that's it from my side. Sorry I took a little more time, but yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, GitHub, and Twitter using my name, my handler Shlok3. And yeah, that's all.
Great
Thank you.
job, man. Great job, Slow. I personally learned a lot of stuff about accessibility. I believe, like, we developers usually ignore this topic, right? And great work of showing through all the tools, testing, and live examples. I hope you kind of share those link with me so that I can add them to the description at a point of time. It will be really, really awesome.
Sure.
Uh, Thank you. Great job.
Thank
Pritesh,
you.
any questions or anything that you want to bring in? But I would request, like, if you kind of tackle the questions offline so that we can bring the next speaker, because we're already running out of time. We can bring the next speaker. In the meantime, you can actually go to the chat, start looking into what are the comments are there and try addressing them. That will be really great.
Definitely, Tapas. And thanks for having me here. It was an amazing experience. Thanks, Pritesh.
Great. Thank you, man. Bye. Okay, so moving on. The last talk, but not the least, is Divyansh. We're going to talk about Next.js 13 features, performance, and a lot of stuff around that. Hey, Divyansh, welcome to the first episode of Open Mic. Why don't you go ahead, start introducing yourself, and get started with your talk?
Yes, hi Tapas. Hi everyone. So let me just share my screen. Just a sec. Okay, so hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Tapas and React Play IO for giving me this opportunity to speak on Next.js amazing features and performance with you all. And without wasting further time, since we are already short of time, right? So I would be quickly walking you through at least the prominent features and performance. So before starting, let me introduce myself. My name is Divyansh Gupta, and currently I'm working as tech lead in Naukri.com. I have experience of about 9 years, primarily in front-end technologies and its related frameworks. So my main inclination is towards JavaScripts and related frameworks, and I was fortunate enough to learn the major frameworks and its migration across different enterprises. So that is why I'm here. I want to share my experience and learning with you all, and at the same time learn from you as well by taking your feedback. Right. So you can find me on the web on Twitter and contact me on Gmail as well. So yeah. So uh, is my screen visible to you all? I was facing some issues with my network.
Yeah, we can see. You can see. You can,
Okay, okay.
yeah, go ahead in the slide view.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we start next, let me just set up the context or tell you why we all are here, right? What is the significance of Next.js and why there is so much hype quite recently in that tech industry, at least, I would say. So let me just set up the context, right? Tapas, actually, I am facing some issues. Let me try one last time. Otherwise, I would switch off my video as I'm facing
Yeah,
some issues.
you can go ahead, switch off your video and just put your
Yes.
stuff. That's You can go ahead, switch off your video.
Okay, so let me just tell you the vision of React, right? Right. What was the initial purpose of React, or why it was there, and what was its earlier shortcoming? So the initial purpose of React is to build fluid user interfaces, right? And it was there to create rich user experience, but it does have certain shortcomings and fallbacks with it. I think I need to rejoin the person. My system is not working correctly. Maybe it was some network issue. I don't know. Or,
What you can do, maybe you just don't get into the slideshow mode. Just go through
right.
the
So,
slide one by one, clicking on
yeah,
them.
yeah,
That
definitely. Yeah,
that might
it
work.
is working
Yeah,
fine. So I will
yeah,
take it from here only. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah. So just bear with me. I mean, some animations won't work in this non-slideshow view, so I will just take you through this only. Okay, so what happens is when React was there, so there were certain steps involved, right? When client requests a page, the server initially in the first step, server sends the response to the browser, right? Till the time loading state is visible to the client or user. Then browser downloads the JS and then finally it executes the React, and the page is finally in the viewable or interactable state, right? So at the end of the stage, this becomes visible, so the page becomes visible to the user in the last stage. So the page load time is quite high, and React alone does takes usually quite a lot of time, right? So that was a main concern, or that was a major problem with the React, that it does takes actually a lot of time for the page to be visible, viewable, or mainly the interactable state, right? So then comes Next.js to the rescue. So yeah, so Next.js does overcomes this problem by reducing the initial load time and introducing server-side rendering framework. So it does reduces the initial load time. So what it does is the server usually sends the ready to be rendered HTML response to the browser, right? So HTML is ready to be rendered, unlike previously where the page was getting rendered at the last point of time. So in the first stage, the server sends the rendered HTML response to the browser, and then finally browser renders this viewable state. So at the second point itself, the page is renderable and the page is visible to the user in the viewable manner, right? So the load time is reduced greatly, and then finally browser executes the React, and finally the page is in the interactable state. So Next.js does reduces the initial load time by introducing server-side rendering, right? So it does provides the best of the two worlds, be it the server-side rendering and the SEO support. So you need not to use the state, and you need not to use the use effect as well. So the page is totally rendered on the server side. So yeah. So apart from this, the page is also rendered at the server side, and the page is also SEO friendly as well at the same time. But again, Next.js does have certain problems associated with it. The problem one is the network payload is still huge, right? So in order to hydrate the page, it does send some logic. It does send some JavaScript and data to the browser in order to hydrate the page and in order to make the page interactable, right? So network payload is still huge, and the second reason is it does. So we introduced another term, right? We introduced server-side rendering. So it does have the server-side context as well. So we do have dual rendering context, which is client-side rendering context and server-side rendering context. So it does provides actually a mental overload in to the developers at least, right? Because we need to switch in between the client-side context and server-side context. The developer needs to decide which component should be client-based or which component should be server-based, and how to actually flow the data or how to make the data shareable across those components, right? So these are the major problems. But quite recently, the React team and Next.js team is workingly very closely together and hand in hand to make Next 13.4 stable version, and it does solves all those problems. So it does have the server-side rendering capability as well, and it does provide you the built-in SEO support as well, and it does embodies the initial React's vision for the future. That is, it it also provides a rich fluid user experience, right? So it does have all those capabilities. So both the teams are quite enthusiastic about it, and they are working very closely together. So yeah, so can we actually say is Next.js is the new standard? Is it the new standard, right? So if you have gone through or have recently checked out the React documentation, you might have noticed that they are also officially recommending us to use a server-side rendering framework, right? So they are officially going into the direction of using React just as a component library only, right? So in order to make an enterprise application, or in order to make things working end to end, they are officially recommending us to use a new server-side rendering framework, be it Next.js or be it Remix. So uh, going forward, I will just tell you the sequence or the timeline of different Next.js versions. So earlier we used to have this Next 12, right, 6 months ago. So where we were having this pre-rendering strategy support, where we used to have three different types of strategies: SSG, ISR, and SSR, right? And then we used to have this Next 13.0.1 version is released, where we have app router, which is in beta, and then we have improved error reporting released with it, and we do have a support of server components, layouts, and pages as well. And then finally, 2 weeks back, we have the next team has come up with a more stable or LTS version of it, which is 13.4, right, in which the app router is finally stable. So this is the foundational release of them, and they have greatly simplified the data fetching techniques. They have also introduced server actions, which I will walk you through all with all of the features, right, and the samples as well, and the performance impacts of using them as well. So, but as you have noticed, I mean, in the span of 6 months, the world has completely changed. At least thinking from the next perspective, or thinking from the server side rendering perspective, that the releases that they have gone through in the production, they have done some major changes, right? So at Naukri as well, so we did migration of major of our pages to Next 13.4 latest version, and we have noticed certain benefits and performance improvements areas as well, and the SEO improvement as well. In all the areas, we have noticed a drastic benefit. So yeah, that is why I am here, and I would be guiding you through all the features and the best practices and the performance areas. So starting with the features and the best practices and the performance. So the first area that has been introduced with Next 13.4 is the app router. So it is now stable. The app router is now stable with the Next 13.4, and it's built on the top of React Server component. So let me just try one more time if I can play with the slideshow mode, because I have used animations and it would be better. So let me just try one more time. Okay, so yeah, so app router is recently introduced and it is now stable. So it does have certain advantages and benefits with it. It does comes up with the support of shared layouts, nested routes as well, and we do have a concept of streaming as well, and loading UI. You can just simply uh, create files, and we do have this inherent or inbuilt support of in capabilities of all those features, right? So Next.js does offers you out of the box features which you can just plug and play, and just simply creating those files would work. So you can also handle error at different levels. You can intercept your dynamic routes as well, and you can just create a not found UI as well. It's not working. Just a second. Okay, so let's assume we do have this URL, right? So we have this URL path where we have three types of categories. We have this root layout. We do have this root structure, and then we have certain segments as well. So the URL path is composed of three patterns. The root segment would be pointed out by the app directory, and the segment would be pointed out by dashboard directory. That is the second segment, and then finally we do have the leaf segment as well. So if I just show you the let me just retry. Tapas, I am resharing my screen. I think that might also work. So let me just retry sharing my screen. Just a second.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll just add it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
The screen
okay.
is visible
So
now.
yeah, so let me try one more time. Otherwise, I will walk through the normal mode only. So
Okay.
currently, I'm facing some technical problems. Previously, I was not able to handle this. So yeah, so we do have this component hierarchy in app router where the particular segment is having these particular files, right, to handle all those features. So in order to create a specific layout, so layout is certain thing which is shared across multiple components, right? So we do have certain routes in our application. So if we are moving from one route to another route, we would be having a common layout. So you can just simply create this layout file, and this UI would be shared across pages or across routes, right? And then we do have error.js file support as well, so whenever a React component is throwing any error, or we do have any application error, which is thrown by Next, or let's say we have any build time error or runtime error, which would be thrown on UI screen, and we just by directly creating this error.js, we can simply show this error UI to the user, to the end user, right? So it just simply the creation of all these files, and the feature is integrated right out of the box by Next.js. So we can create a loading state as well. So this loading state would be intermittently shown to the user until the page is in loading state, right? So until the data is loaded onto a particular page, this loading state would be visible. So you just simply can create all these files, and all these features would be right there integrated. uh, but there is one more point that I want to put emphasis on, is that the error component is being wrapped up into the error boundary, right? So this is a general design pattern or the development pattern that we should follow, that error would be wrapped up in the error boundary component, and the loading would be in suspense. And we do have this context as well. So every nesting would be having its own context. So the setting route segment would be having its own nesting. So as you can see this purple rectangle, where we have this nesting of these all these components just specific to the settings part, and we do have other component hierarchy as well. Okay, so moving forward, yeah, just a second. Yeah, moving forward, the performance benefits of app router is mainly lies in the form of three main primary factors, right? So the first is it uses the server-centric routing. So unlike previously, we used to have this client-centric routing approach, but now we do have server-centric routing approach. So let's say we do have this app, right, and we are moving from one page to the another. So we are just migrating from dashboard page to the settings page, right? So once we are migrating from one page to another, or everything or the state of the application would be preserved, right? So what React does is it does maintains or stores the result of React server components, that is a payload, right, in the form of in-memory client-side cache, and which is by default divided by the segment route segment. So the in-memory cache would be created for layout as well, and in-memory cache would be created for page as well. So this cache is getting reused across once we are moving from one page to the another. So that greatly improves the performance factor, and it does support the partial rendering as well. So once we are moving from one page to another, in this case these are the sibling pages, right? So we do have this settings and analytics route segment as sibling, because these both are the children of dashboard layout. So once we are moving from sibling hierarchy, then all these the only those components would be partially rendered that are getting changed. So using the cache, the partial rendering mechanism is being supported by Next.js, and we do have extra support for advanced routing patterns as well. So like we do have parallel routes as well, the support for integrating parallel routes as well. So let's say if we want to create multiple dashboards, right? So I won't be able to show, I mean, I have integrated certain animations, but since due to the technical glitch, I won't be able to show that. So I can just iterate this. So in the case of parallel routes, we can integrate the dashboard. So let's say if you have a use case or particular scenario where you need to show multiple dashboards or multiple views, right, in a single routing context. So you can just integrate those parallel routes as well, and we can also handle the intercepting routes as well. So as you have noticed or have seen on certain websites that you show that certain times a website shows you a pop-up layer, right, or once you click any item. So instead of changing the route at the global level, this route can be intercepted and a third 3D layer can be shown. So this is the advanced routing patterns that comes with next 13, right? So how do you actually now decide what should be the React component, React server component, and what should be the client based components, right? So let me just show you the images. So think of it in this manner. So you have a web application, right, and you do have certain components. So your app would be composed of server components as well and client component as well. So you can make all those static components as server components, and those components which are dependent on user behavior. So in this particular example, let's say the search bar or the button are the interactable components, right? So in this case, these would be the client based components. So the generic approach is to make all those components which are behavioral based or user interactable. Then we need to make them as client based components, and other components we can keep it as server based components, right? So in this particular example, the toggle button is without using use client, right? So it would be showing you the error. So in app router, by default, all the components are server side components. So if in order to make any component a client side component, you need to use this particular directive, that is use client. So after using use client, this component would be no more treated as a server side component, it would be treated as a client side component, right? So there are certain rules or parameters, or at least scenarios where you need to actually decide. So let's say if you need to fetch the data, then you need to make it as a server component, because you need to utilize the server infrastructure, right? And similarly, if you, let's say if you want to use other backend resources, or you need to keep the sensitive information or the API data, then in that case as well, you can use the React server components. But if in those cases where you need to have the interactivity, or you need to use the state or lifecycle hooks or browser based APIs, then in those cases you need to make them as client based components, right? So let's see how does it matters, how does it actually matters, why we are making anything as a React server component, or why we are making anything as client based component. So what happens is that, so in this particular example, as you can see, the whole application is divided into a particular layout, right? So this is a blogs layout, and we do have this pink highlighted component as a React server component, which is a page component. And in that we do have this client component. So we do have these two cards where we have marked or explicitly made them as client based components. And so these two components would be fetched and rendered on the browser itself. But the server components, which is a card list component, page component, would be rendered on the server only. So if you see the Webpack internal bundle, which is shipped to the client, would be having only the bundles for the client-based components. So it won't be having any server-based JavaScript. So the main benefit or the performance edge that the React server components does provides is that it does not ship extra JavaScript to the client. So it greatly reduces the load time as well, and it greatly reduces the size of JavaScript. But again, there is a subtle difference between React server components and server side rendering, right? So we talked about two things: the React server components and React server side rendering, right? So both these support comes up with Next 13, but both of these things are actually complementary to each other, or I would say at least there is a very subtle difference. So in case of React server components, we used to have something like this. So there would be a script which would be coming from server, and it would be appearing something like JSON format, right? But it's not actually a JSON. But there would be certain JSON format which would be coming, and which would be actually informing the Next.js to merge and hydrate the HTML and the data part out of it. But unlike in the case of server-side rendering, the whole HTML is rendered onto the page, and is being served from server to the client. So that is a subtle difference, and that is how behind the scenes the scripting part is working in both of these cases, right? Then another feature is the simplified data fetching technique, right? So let's say you have a root layout component, right, and you are making a request for a and b component in root layout, and you do have certain another layouts and another components as well sitting besides it. Or let's say in down deep down the hierarchy, we do have certain components in another page components as well, right? So in those scenarios we are making certain calls. So let's say we are making a call from b component as well and c components as well. So in total all the requests are these, right? So we do have certain lot of request that is being generated from different components down the hierarchy, right? So what Next 13 does is it automatically dedupes all those requests. So they have greatly reduced this, or they have greatly simplified the data fetching in a manner that they have written an API layer over fetch. So in order to dedupe the request, right? So if I just show you so there are three types of data fetching techniques, which are the caching, or we can say the static data fetching, or the dynamic data fetching, or actually making the revalidation of data. So by default, if we are using the fetch API call, so this is the way how we are statically fetching the data, and it would be put up in the cache forever, and it would remain there forever. If we are making subsequent requests, the data would be served from cache by default, and it would remain there forever. So the force value of the default value of this particular parameter cache, which is being passed into the fetch options as a second argument, would be force cache. So this is the default value. And let's say if you want to fetch the data dynamically, you want to actually refresh the data on each and every fetch request, then you can use the cache parameter as no store. So this is the dynamic way of handling the data or fetching the data. The final revalidating of cache data can be done through revalidate parameter in this fetch options, right? So you can just provide the revalidate parameter in the timeout interval. So these are the three ways. So as you can see, I mean, the data fetching technique is greatly simplified. Unlike previously, you need to, so what usually happens with earlier versions of Next, you need to fetch the data at root level, right? And then you would be setting it up into the context, or you would be actually flowing the data through props to the deep dive components, or down the hierarchy you would be passing the data through props only, right? But now you can just simply sit in any of the React server component, and you can just simply use the native fetch API and just pass on this fetch options accordingly, whatever way you wants to handle the data in your server side rendered application. And then simply using the native API you can do the same, right? So that is greatly simplified. Then moving forward with the next feature, which is the built-in metadata API support, right? So it does provides provides you the capability of handling the SEO part. So it does provides you the support for adding multiple SEO parameters. Like so, you need not to import anything else. You can just simply create a constant. In our case, we have created this termed as metadata, and you can just simply provide the different values of certain SEO meta tags in this particular object, right? So you can define your title as well, you can define your description, and you can define your other parameter values in this particular object. So this is a way of statically defining the metadata, right? And another one is the dynamic. Let's say if you want to dynamically set the metadata on the basis of some API call, then you can just simply create this function generate metadata, and then you can make an API call and then finally return all these meta tags, right? So, and again, you can do this by setting in any of the component, right? So this is a great advantage that Next 13 has recently introduced. You can simply override any of the metadata sitting in any of the component deep down the hierarchy. So you can have your default metadata tags defined at root layout level or page level. Then you can just simply override all those metadata tags by simply overriding it into your nested components, right? So we do have this static way of using the metadata, and we do have this dynamic way of using metadata as well. So what Next.js does is it will automatically create all these meta tags in HTML for you on the basis of values that you have provided in this particular object. So as you have seen, we have provided title, we have provided description. Likewise, you can provide your OG tags as well and other metadata attributes. So it will automatically, Next.js will automatically create these HTML tags for you, right? So you need not to write anything. So this is a great support or built-in SEO support that has greatly improved the developer experience, at least I would say. Okay, moving forward, the yeah, so the main feature that they have introduced, or I would say this is an extraordinary one. So I would take some of your time here specifically. So this feature is known as server actions, and it is currently in an alpha version. So in 13.4, it is currently in alpha, right? So sooner or later, it might be a stable one as well in upcoming versions. No one knows that. So how much time will it take? So I mean, so they are very quick in progressing, and they are very quick in resolving all those issues. So yeah, so speaking of server actions, so let's say if you want to mutate some data on server side, right? What you used to do is you need to write an API layer, right? So let's assume you have a button in your UI, right? And click of button, you want to mutate your data on server, right? So what you will do is you will create an API layer, or you will create a route handler specific to the route, right, which you are creating. So you need to create an extra API layer, and then in that particular API layer, you would be sending or making an API call, right, or mutating the data, right, or making a DB query. So in this case, let's just take an example of this. So let's say we do have this form, right, and you want to add some more products into existing DB where the products are stored, right? So we do have this input where user can just simply provide the product name and then simply press the submit. And in on the press of this submit button, you need to update your product list, which is stored somewhere in DB, right? So now what they have done is you need not to write an API layer. You can just simply create a function, right? And then give this function in a form action submit. So by default, the behavior of a some form submit, where the submit button is present, this action would be triggered, right? And in this action, we have provided an asynchronous function, right? So form data would be passed, and this then by using this use server, we are actually telling Next.js that this is the server action, right? So it does have the capability of actually doing the server side operation, right? So we can do any database operation here. We can play with anything, right? So it would be a server operation. It would no more be a client operation. So isn't it amazing? I mean, think of it in a manner that you are sitting on a client, you are just simply pressing a button and you are mutating the data on server, right? So in the function itself, you are just making a DB call, right? So you are just mutating the data right there. So server actions does provides this. So any PHP developer would be present, if present here, would closely relate to it, because in PHP we used to handle and write each and everything in a single file. So they are actually migrating it to the PHP way of coding, right, with server actions. So yeah. Okay. Apart from this, there are certain other features as well that they have actually provided, and which we have used in Naukri as well, and which does actually provides an extra edge. So I'm just mentioning them because we are short of time and I need to cover all those features. So we do have font optimizations right off the box. So using next/font, we can use optimized fonts. So in this case, all the fonts would be rightly bundled from at the server itself. So there won't be no network request that would be calling from browser. So they are using inherently the Google fonts in order to support that. And then we do have certain image optimizations as well, and core web vitals improvement as well. And to use that, we need to use their component next image, right? So they do have this capability. So let's say if you don't have provided, let me just give you an example. So if you do not have provided any width or height attribute, right, so to the image, then then it would be causing CLS shifts, right, cumulative layout shift. So it would be actually impacting your core web vitals. So what they have done is whenever you are using this next image component, it would actually prompt the user right there itself that you have not provided. the image and height attribute, and it would be actually impacting the CLS. So likewise, other optimization or other core web vital support is greatly provided here by Next 13, right? And then we have link API improvement as well for better user engagement, and they have also introduced client side hooks as well, and they have finally also introduced some more special functions for server components. So I have written each and everything in detail on my Medium article as well, so I will share you all those links. And yeah, so those were the mainly features. So covering all, and in the end I would say, I mean, going through all of this, those features, what we actually know and what we actually love, and speaking on the experience or on the migration process that we have followed, at least in our enterprise, we can say that the percentage enhancements that Next 13 is actually offering you, and the developer experience and the built-in SEO support that this server side rendering framework is actually providing is greatly amazing. I mean, we so the developer experience is quite amazing. I mean, it does offer you a lot of capabilities, right? So out of the box. So the superior developer experience, or the focus on the performance, or the built-in SEO support. I mean, Next 13.4 is, I would say, at least it would be a good choice for production application. So yeah, it does provides you an extra edge. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. And if you have any questions, since I was already short of time and I just need to simply cover it, or at least pinpoint the major features or performance benefits. And sorry for the technical glitch that I recently faced. So yeah, you can reach out on to me on my Twitter handle as well, or I can resolve your queries or if concerns if you have any. So thank you so much. Thank you, Tapas. Thank you, React Play.
Awesome sessions, man. I learned a lot. I feel like now diving into Next.js and maybe start creating some content around that. That probably my next goal. Thanks for motivating me
Actually, I
with
do
your
have,
session.
so yeah, I was actually planning to show certain examples or coding examples as well, but due to the technical glitch, I mean, it was unfortunate, at least on my end, that I am facing this issue. So
That's fine. That's fine. It happens. It happens. So what you can do is like maybe some way if you can share this presentation, keeping on your drive or somewhere, and share it with me. I'll
yes,
add it to the
definitely.
description
Yeah,
of this video, so that everybody
yes,
can
definitely.
look into it later.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
it's really awesome, Divyansh. If you can come on screen, and we are actually getting into the end of it. Pritesh, any questions or anything that you want to take up before we wrap up and make the call out?
Uh, I can't see any questions in the chat box, but I can see a lot of appreciation for the kind of
Yeah,
presentation Divyansh has delivered. Like it was super insightful, and you have touched every single bit of what Next.js is. So
yeah.
kudos to Divyansh on such a great presentation, and everyone loved the presentation. I can see a lot of comments on that, like for the presentation itself.
Thank you,
Awesome,
Pratik.
great. Awesome. So yeah, if our presenters are still there on stage, you guys can come, just show your face because we just want to kind of say goodbye to everyone. I guess Supriya just dropped off. That's fine. So thank you everyone who are live with us. I know that we have kind of extended by 38 minutes, but there are folks who patiently listening to it, learning from us, which is like extremely motivating. So we want to do this open mic session like every 2 weeks. So it means that 26th we'll be back with the episode 2, and the talks for episode 2 is around JavaScript, React.js, Monstack, and about development practices. So we'll have 4 short talks, 10-minute talks for next session. So I hope that you join us and again learn from it. Thank you, Shlok. Thank you, Divyansh. Thanks, Supriya, for taking your time out and doing this superb job. Guys have made a lot of kind of preparation, and that is shown over here. So please continue your public speaking journey. Make sure that you keep doing it. Many other forums, and of course in React Play in future again. Right? We'll see you again. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Pritesh. All the best. Good night, everyone. Good day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
So